Hello, Eva. So I am Lacey, your lactation counselor, and you guys are listening to the Early Motherhood Guide podcast. Here, there we go. Okay. Um, so today I have the opportunity to speak with Eva. Hello. So please, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello. The hold on just a second. My earbuds, for some reason, can you hear me okay?
Oh, I can't hear you now.
My earbuds disconnected
Yeah, I heard you a second ago, but
and now I can't hear. Hold on, the joy of
yeah,
technology. Okay, we're good?
yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
So why don't you
Uh,
introduce yourself?
Sorry, say that again?
Oh, sorry. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, thanks. Uh, so my name's Eva. I am the founder of Eva Wellness. I'm a nurse who is now a mind body specialist. So I'm a nurse as well as a yoga therapist. I've been a nurse for about 17 years, and 10 of those years I was an ICU nurse and also charge nurse while I was ICU nurse. So that meant that I responded to a lot of different events throughout the hospital.
That sounds incredibly giving and stressful, but we appreciate it. So, then let's go right into mothers and birth. So I have had one hospital birth, and I think it can be incredibly hard. Speaking your wishes when you're in the middle of labor, right? And so we all have this birth plan, and I like to express them as wishes because things don't always go as planned. So I'd love to know, how can we as mothers in labor do a better job of vocalizing our birth wishes?
One is remembering that um, your safety as well as baby safety is always that is at the forefront of what everybody is focused on. But also having that relationship with your OB-GYN and your nurses, that you're letting them know exactly what it is that you're envisioning. Um, but with that, having a little bit of that flexibility to let, if life happens, then it's um, everybody's focused on safety and having the best relationship. But I think a lot of that has to do with choosing the right environment. I mean, sometimes um, we can't control the circumstances, but we can express our views, and being kind and compassionate to the medical um, to the medical staff, but also for them too, is having them be a little more kind and compassionate with the stress of the events. And with that, that's just in being very, very clear and communicating exactly what it is that you're hoping the event looks like and feels like, and um, you know, letting them know that there's that give and take, that everybody's part of the situation and not just there's only one way this is going to happen.
Yeah. It's so funny with my first, and having it in a hospital. I envisioned this like beautiful, I wanted to do hypnobirthing. And so I had my hypnobirthing tracks going. And of course, you're first, it's intense, right? And so I'm in the middle of a contraction as a nurse comes in, and I just completely cussed like in the middle of a contraction. And she's like, she hears the track, and she's like, "Oh, you're hypnobirthing." And my husband just thought it was hilarious, because and I have these like fake candles lit and everything trying to set this mood. And it was so funny because it was like at that point I was like, none of this is working. Like I am not calm. So yeah, it's funny how you have like this idea of how you want it to go, and yet that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go that way, right? Whether that's internal or external factors, like, there's always so many things. But with your first, it can be pretty intense if you're not ready for it. But I loved having a birth plan, but also like being aware of like what to ask for, right? So is there anything that is like absolute, like you as a nurse, you would always want to know? Is there something like very specific that you like look for in a birth plan if they have written it? Do you know what I mean?
Yes. And some of the things are, being as vocal and upfront as you can about everything,
Mm-hmm.
if there's any allergies, if there's any particular methods of soothing that you've been using, anything that is it really important to you, just being clear that these are the things that work well for me, and how can we bring this into the environment in a safe way.
Yeah.
So if there's music that you like to play, or if there's, essential oils, just being mindful that um, if if that medical person isn't educated on those particular things, then just offering, hey, are you aware of how helpful this is? And would you mind being part of this? And usually everybody's just, absolutely,
Yeah.
let's try it. Let's see what works. And in the end, this is your experience, and it should, theoretically, it should go exactly the way that you would like it to, but we know there's some situations that we just don't have control over.
Yeah.
And when that happens, having that grace and compassion and kindness, not just for everybody around you, but for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing is like, obviously the nurses are there to support you and everybody wants a nice, healthy baby in the end, but being able to communicate, like, this is the way I would like the experience to go, I think is extremely crucial of setting up those expectations for everyone, right? So, with that, how do you relaxing during birth, right? So you have experience in both on being mindful and in nursing, but how do you recommend to help being more mindful and relaxing your breathing, just being more relaxed during birth, because that obviously helps tremendously having labor progress.
Yes, absolutely. And the best recommendation that I would have would be to start practicing that now. Don't wait until the labor process has started, but instead bringing these components into your life now. And it can be something as simple as just breathing and focusing more on the exhale. When we exhale, it's a signal to our body for the muscles to soften and relax. And a lot of times when we're anxious, keyed up, in pain, we have a tendency to hold really tight, and we hold our breath, and that's the opposite of what we're wanting to do, because we're wanting to let go, and we're wanting the process to be more relaxed. So having that practice already there, and then again having these habits of things that you do in your daily life that work for you. So if there's a particular type of music that you listen to that's really calming for you, have that there. There's specific items like a blanket, or a pillow, or something that just instantly brings relaxation to you. Have that there with you. Whatever the different things that you do in your daily life that can help you with relaxation, if you're practicing them regularly, then when you get to that situation, you're going to have that muscle memory that will, even though your mind and it may be racing and you're thinking, oh my God, how could I possibly relax during this situation? Because, I've got the watermelon coming out of the space that doesn't normally fit a watermelon. That muscle memory can kind of help bring you back into that mode of relaxation, where you're using the physiology of the body to work on calming the body, but it will also in turn work on the mind as well.
Yeah, there's something about breathing and like doing that slower breath that actually physically does something to your body, of slowing everything down, which is pretty cool. It is challenging, and yes, I would absolutely recommend practicing beforehand. With my first, I did practice quite a bit, and then I practiced less and less with my last two, but that doesn't mean I should with every birth practice more and more, and being more mindful or being more prepared, I think, is a key, right? And so when you're at the hospital, so I try to always show my appreciation to the nurses or the midwife. How, like, this last time, I was so busy, but I did bring like Oreo cookies, right? Or something, just anything for them to snack on. But how would you recommend to show their appreciation? So, like, sometimes I'll write cards, depending on how busy in life I am. But is there something that nurses just always appreciated more than others?
Oh my gosh. There are so many different ways to show appreciation to nurses. And one of the biggest things is just simply a thank you. It's having worked as an ICU nurse for so long, and I've been in the hospital system for 20 years. So I've gotten a lot of weird comments, and the thank yous are always appreciated. But also things like little baskets of granola bars, chocolates, yeah, honestly, anything that can be picked up and eaten on the go is always appreciated. There's just little things have lots of meaning. Just that sense of appreciation is always that part goes a long way.
Yeah. My first birth, my sweet mother went to like Nordstrom's and got like these decadent cookies from like their cafe and gave them to the nurses after, which was so sweet. And then of course by my third, I'm like, here's some Oreos. So I'll have to work on that.
And it's there's no gift that's too small. Honestly,
Yeah.
it's the sentiment behind it that is incredibly appreciated.
Okay, good. Something that it's good to be prepared and have something that is not needed to be refrigerated, and then a little thank you note is always, I always like to do. So
yeah, anything that can be picked up
hours.
and you can walk away and still be eating it, those are golden.
Good to know. Yeah, because sometimes you're not the nicest when you're in labor. And so if my physical words aren't kind, at least my chocolate is.
Oh yes, I've got some really colorful descriptions of things that people had said to me at different times in their illness cycle. And the thing is we always understand that when somebody is not well, especially in birth, what you're saying is not the person that you are.
Right. You have to have some really thick skin, I'm sure. Yeah,
absolutely. That's you just understand that's not who that person is at that moment. That's anger leaving the body. That's pain leaving the body.
Yeah, very true. I with my first, it was really intense, and I was transitioning, and I remember the nurse being like, she's only a 6, like, and I wanted to kill this lady, like, because I was literally going from a 6 to a 10 in minutes. Like, it was the most intense minutes of my life. And for her to just be like, oh, she's only 6, like, they're like, she's got a long way to go. And I was I'm going to kill all of you and this baby's going to fall out. So it worked out. And yes, like tried to undo all of what I said, but a very interesting experience. So, with that, how can we be better prepared for a hospital birth?
Having the things that are important to you, having those items
Mm.
already prepared, taking a tour
Oh
of
yeah.
the hospital. Most places will offer a tour either virtually or in person, and making that a priority, so that you already have an idea of what the space is going to look like for you. You have ideas of things that you can bring, um, snacks for dad, because the staff will bring all kinds of snacks for mom, but they don't necessarily always have stuff there for dad. Pillows, blankets, the different things that are going to make you feel cozy and comfortable and make you feel safe and secure. Those items are really important. And then just having that grace and compassion for yourself, that if things don't go 100% the way you're expecting them to, and for moms that have never had a baby, I think that happens a little bit more, because by the time you have baby number two, you kind of understand, you've been through the whole process, but understanding that every birth is completely different, whether it's your first birth or your fifth birth. Every birth is very different. It's a unique experience. And being in that experience, being mindful in that experience, to take the time to be kind to yourself, be kind to your partner, and just that communication between yourself and the nursing staff as well too. Um,
There's so
so
much there. Like to be prepared for your husband, right? So, or your partner, or whoever's there to be there for you. No one thinks about that person. They are in it just as long as you are, right? That is huge, and something that usually they have at the birth center, they have you bring a meal for yourself afterwards as well, and you can't leave until you have that meal. And so, same for the poor husband, right? It's like I should have a meal there for him because he's probably starving just as much. And then to be prepared and like going through the hospital and knowing where you're going to be dropped off and where you're going to get checked in and where the rooms are and like what room could you possibly, so you can start visualizing, how do I want this birth to go, right? Because it's so much easier to visualize the birth if you at least have a room to focus on, right? There's not so many unknowns. You've seen the faces of the nurses, you've had a tour of the hospital, I mean, it's the weirdest thing when your husband drops you off and you're like alone. Where do I go now? While they go park the car and you're like, and they don't even want, like, I'm not supposed to leave you, right? So it's good to have that walkthrough, right? Yeah.
and for both, yeah, both for yourself and for your partner, because they're trying to be supportive, but
Yeah.
they're also in their own sense of unknown, and
Yeah.
you know having that, the more things that you can learn and understand prior
Mm-hmm.
to, will help you feel more secure and more safe, and yeah, hopefully make the experience, I mean, the experience should be amazing and beautiful. It's
Yeah.
such a phenomenal experience. um Even, regardless of the process of it,
Yeah.
for some it's not a magical experience, and I say that now. My birth with my son was 30 years ago, so there's that time in there where I do remember I was not thinking it was a magical experience at the time that I was having it. In fact, I was just like, give me all the meds now. um And so, when I walked in, I had every intention of, oh no meds. I'll be fine. It'll be good. I'll be okay. And then once we got into the
The real.
transition phase, I was just like, no, I lied.
Yeah, and I think that's and also being prepared for your expectations and giving yourself grace because um when the first if you have the idea and the desire to go natural, giving yourself grace, and I gave myself limits. And so I was like, I'm okay if I decide to have an epidural if this happens. And so for me, it was if I ended up needing Pitocin, I don't think I could naturally handle that. And if I go more than 24 hours, funny thing now, I've gone through 3 labors. No way could I make it 24 hours naturally. There's just no way. So that was my plan to give myself grace already. I was prepared to be okay with not hitting my goal of going a natural birth if things didn't go as planned. And I was very grateful that those things did go as planned. And so in the end, I was just I was ecstatic, on the birth high. But it is important because things really don't go as planned. And so it is not the end of the world if you decide to have an epidural. I see a lot of moms when they do get that epidural, all of a sudden they're able to transition right after that, right? Because they're now able to relax. Where if you're like holding on for dear life, like fighting it, and you're just been at a certain like diameter or whatever, was it centimeter? Centimeters. If you have been at that, and you're not making any progress, and just having an epidural will allow you and your body to um, progress, that's amazing, and it is so good to be prepared on whatever route, but to give yourself grace because there's a lot of unknowns, right? So that is
Yes.
great.
Yeah. And that's just it. There's so many unknowns, and being able to be kind. Yeah. Give yourself grace, be kind to yourself, be understanding of the fact that, the experience itself is, in terms of what your body is going through, it's a lot it's a lot to go through. And the more that you can be kind to yourself, and it's okay to take assistance when needed. And then, when you look back on it, still, yeah, we always have this idea of what we would like it to look like, and being able to look back on it and just, say it would have been great had it gone the way I had wanted to, but it didn't. So now how do I move forward? And there may be that time period in between where you need to, process, whether it's with your therapist or, whoever, whatever mental health professional, or, how your best friend, however that happens, process that, and letting go of that so that you can enjoy your time with baby.
Yeah. And there is such a there can be a grievance process, right, with your birth if it doesn't go according to plan, very easily, and it can be traumatizing. Like at the end of my first, I really felt like kind of feel traumatized, and it's a thing to process, even though things went so well. It is still an intense experience that's unlike anything else, and it's transformational, right? So to give yourself grace and then that time to process it, whether you are talking to someone professionally or a friend, which is why I love watching birth stories. I think that is therapeutic in itself, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that community aspect helps you to know that it's not just you. You're not the only one that um, that went through a process that looked different than what you anticipated, or, that you have a certain level of expectation, and that wasn't met. And just like you said, there may need to be a grieving process for that. But then how do you move forward with where you are with baby, and to be able to enjoy that experience? And all of that is just giving yourself that grace and that compassion.
Yeah. So there's so many ways I think you could do a whole episode on just being prepared in birth in so many different aspects, right? And so here's one that I really wanted. So I gave birth to my last baby just before COVID started, which I'm extremely grateful for. But if someone has birthed before COVID and now they're going to give birth again after, is there any expectations that they should have? Is it going to be different in any way moving forward? That could be different than it was before because where the world has changed.
Absolutely. And it just depends on what facility
Mhm.
you're going to, because a lot of different facilities, we're all still in this process of we've never experienced this before. So, we're still on the end of a pandemic. We're coming out of it, and there's sometimes where hospitals have to become tighter in their restrictions and times when they can be more open. And it's just, again, it's that level of communication, asking questions. What are the things that we can do? What are the things that we can't do? Uh, Visitors are not being restricted in most places any longer, but there are still areas where they're asking for COVID tests. They're asking, for different things, and it's just being mindful of that. And what's the current state and the environment in the area where you are, because depending on caseloads, that may not affect directly the area where you're giving birth, but it is going to affect the staffing of the hospital in terms of what are the things that are available. And again, this is just an unprecedented time, and having that grace and compassion for yourself, but also for the staff, because a lot of the medical field right now is just exhausted.
Yeah.
They're being stretched in a lot of different ways, and for some folks they're able to handle it well, and for others, they're healing too.
Yeah, that's true. And so are you thinking, would you expect less staff on like a more locked down time? Would that be more longer wait time if you're like needing some assistance?
It all depends
Depends.
on the area of
Yeah.
where you are, because there are areas with staffing issues depending on what the capacity of the hospital is, and how many patients, what the census is of the hospital at that time. If they have a lot of units that are at full capacity, that makes staffing an issue. And staffing is always an issue. That's something that hasn't changed in decades of
Okay.
medicine. So that's always a concern. And typically we're able to navigate that well, and some places do better than others. So this is where having more information about the area where you live and the area where you're going to be using the facilities is really important.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it can be so different, right? So I where I live, it's definitely been more stricter lockdowns. And somebody I interviewed last time was they gave birth on the day the lockdown started in COVID, which like what an experience. But she had a home birth. So it didn't really, they were like, oh, isn't this interesting? And it didn't really affect who was there yet because she said it was great because it was so new. No one really knew how to implement it yet. It was really interesting. But yeah, you really have no idea. And so it's, I think, another reason to be more prepared and asking those questions where you're planning to give birth, because there are a lot of unknowns and things change in the future so rapidly now. So, yeah, I think it could be a huge difference than it was before. I was so grateful that I was able to have a doula and a birth photographer and my husband, which flew out of the country for the birth. And if that was a few months later, that would not have happened. So
Yeah.
hopefully moving forward though, I believe, and she also had a doula business. And so imagine like are you going to be able to have a doula there? That is something I do believe they're allowing those now, right? That's good.
Yeah, and a lot of hospitals are incorporating doulas more. And because we've had these situations with COVID, I think some places are becoming a little more receptive to multiple roles within the birthing process. And I would love to see this happening more in healthcare, where we're expanding the options that are available to people and having lots of different environments and scenarios, because birth home births are just an absolutely fantastic experience. They are just amazing. I was able to assist a dear friend of mine in her
Yes.
home birth, not as a nurse, just purely as a support person. And she had a midwife and a doula there, and they were amazing. Uh, and for some people, that's exactly what they want, and other people are just like, nope, forget it, give me the pitocin and the epidural and I am good to go. And that's the thing, is everybody's experience should be as close to what it is that they're wanting.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we provide that environment that supports everybody?
Yeah. For sure. And like some people are just going to want more support just in case, right? So with my first, there was a lot of meconium in the amniotic fluid. And so they were able to have that stuff come right down when needed, which was great. But if you want a more intimate birth where it's like, I just want my midwife, maybe a doula, and that is it. That is, a different option. There's so many options. And so if you're wanting more, yeah, I love the option post-COVID. Home births, I think, are awesome if that is your desire. So you were saying that you had some experience in the neonatal care. What is to be expected? I have been very fortunate to not have that experience, but what would a mama expect in a case that they had to go to neonatal?
And every neonatal intensive care unit is different. And when I worked in the NICU, I was working there as a phlebotomist and not as a nurse. But it was such a phenomenal environment to work in, and I absolutely loved my time there. Neonatal nurses are a very special breed because they become part of the family. They become that extension of the family, that they are very protective of those children, and they go to bat for them right from the get-go. And so there are a lot more restrictions in terms of who can go into the unit. If you even potentially feel like you may have the sniffles or the sneezes or anything along those lines, being vocal and just saying, hey, this is what's going on, and how can I go in and be safe for myself as well as all of the children that are in that space. And just being understanding that everything that they are doing is so that that baby gets everything that they need to be able to grow up safe and strong.
Yeah. I never thought about that with the illness, because after you give birth, you're sleep deprived, you've gone through so much, your immune system is down. So the odds of getting sick, are high. I can always see, I always think around like 6 weeks is when mamas always get sick. It's around the 6 week mark where they always get, because they're just so tired. And obviously, yeah, communicating that with the staff beforehand. Does that mean that they would have to would they have to space out their visit, or does that mean that they're going to have to pump to bring over breast milk, or are they having to like stay away until they were better? How would that experience
It
go?
all depends on what the illness is, what's going on, and just the more you communicate with them and let them know, the more they can offer, like just like you were saying, they can offer lots of different options in terms of, because the other thing too is maybe what mom needs at that moment is that time to rest and recover, because she has been through so much stress and so much physical upheaval as well too, that you know having somebody there with baby to watch while she gets in a couple of hours of a nap, whatever the situation is, the more communication that happens, the better.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a client that had three of her babies in the NICU for an extended period of time. And their fourth, they were able to take home right after the hospital. And she said it was an entirely different experience. One thing was her other babies were on like a great schedule. And because it went at the NICU, they have these like, you're on a great routine. And then her fourth was like, just, she was like a new mom all of a sudden, which is funny. It's like an entirely different experience, which is fun to be a part of.
And it's that was such a phenomenal experience, and just the amount of time that the nurses spend, that all of the staff spend with the babies, they're just they become really you know whether they become part of the lifelong extension of the family or not, they're always, those memories are always there, and there's always a lot of emotion that's involved with that.
Yeah, I can't imagine like being there for some of them are there for quite an extended period of time. And then do they ever come back to visit and to like give them updates or cards?
Yes, and several of the nurses that I worked with, they stayed in contact with the parents for a long time, and I believe that there was even there were little reunions that they had periodically as well too. And so, yeah, I got to tell you, as a nurse, being able to have somebody come back or write a card and just say, because this was, even as an ICU nurse, there's a lot of times where we didn't even know what happened with the person. Did they transferred out of the ICU? Did they do well? Did they not do well? What, did they, a lot of times it was because they didn't even remember, but and somebody came back and was just like, hey, guess what? I'm all better now. And those moments were just absolutely amazing. Every card that somebody gave me, I still have all of those, because they meant so much to me.
What a good idea. Yeah, that's a great tip. To get a little update. I'm sure that would be very rewarding.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, those happy memories carry you a lot.
Yeah, I bet. Very needed. Okay, so I believe you have a course and a great boot camp or a challenge, right? For a little bit more of self-care. Can you tell me a bit more about it?
Yeah, so I have been combining all of the different experience and the different trainings that I've utilized to help nurses specifically, but really anybody that has a lot of stress in their life, to be able to use the things that they have in their own life to create self-care rituals that can help them either manage or prevent burnout, because exhaustion and stress leave an imprint on us. And it's not just a mental component, but it's also a physical relationship. So just as you were talking about how when moms get sick, usually around week 6, that's usually about the time when their energy reserves are completely depleted, and exhaustion and stress have caught up with them. And that's the reason that they're getting sick, is because they're depleted.
Yeah.
And so anything that you can do to bring that back into your life and bring your body back towards balance will help you to stay healthy and to be more kind and compassionate, not just to yourself, but also to those around you as well. And I have a course that I'm utilizing in working with nurses and anybody with high stress to find ways to look specifically at their life and learn what it is that they need for themselves to get that mind-body integration. And so that'll be happening. The class is a free event, and that's happening January 9th through the 11th. And if anybody's interested, they can just message and I will send them the link to opt in for that.
Yeah, what an amazing tool to have, because it is such a trying time and you're constantly giving everything to everyone else. And even if your partner, like, how are you going? Usually, if you are depleted, you could typically take it out on your partner or anyone around you, right? And so to have these tools to take care of yourself already instilled and not be touched out or just exhausted and just be able to enjoy those early days of motherhood would be very valuable, I think.
Absolutely. And a lot of the difficult times can be made so much easier when we give ourselves that kindness and compassion to accept help, to not feel that we have to do everything 100% on our own, but to be able to, it sounds so silly, but just to be able to say the dishes can sit in the sink, the clothes can sit on the washer for a day, and instead, how can we have meaning with the moments that are happening right now, and to do so with all of that joy that comes from that. Even when you're sitting in that time period where baby has pooped through all of the clothes and the diapers, and how can you take that moment and just go, this is going to be something that we're going to laugh at years from now, but how can we find the joy in this moment, even though we're up to our elbows in whatever baby has projected out.
Right. I know. I think I take that advice too well because my laundry is always waiting to be folded. Like, yeah, it'll be folded eventually, right?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming today and talking with me and preparing our mamas more for birth and taking care of their bodies and their nurses, which obviously so need it. And thank you everyone for watching and listening. I will see you guys all next week on the Early Motherhood Guide podcast. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Lacey, for all you do.
Oh, thank you so much. All right. I will see you guys later.
Okay.
Bye. Thanks,
Take
Eva.
care.